BlackCloak provides concierge cybersecurity protection to corporate executives and high net worth individuals to protect against hacking, reputational loss, financial loss, and the impacts of a corporate data breach. Learn more at blackcloak.io.
All right, here we are. This is another episode, a new episode of Redefining Society and Technology podcast, where we talk about how to use technology to improve society instead of following all the blinking lights and the funny noises that technology and gadget can do, and then trying to realize what have we done, right? I like to think that we need to plan a little bit better, and in order to do that, I love to talk with people that have been dealing with technology all their career, their life, and Lawrence Etta, my guest today, he certainly had quite of an experience with technology. He's a TED speaker. He wrote a book. He's been in consulting for technology for a long time and has been chief technology officer for the city of Toronto, Canada, amongst other things that we're going to learn during the show. So enough about me, Lawrence. I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you for coming by.
Well, Marco, it's truly a pleasure, and thank you to you and your audience for the opportunity, and really looking forward to this conversation. And I also love the title Redefining Society in your technology podcast, because at the end of the day, it is about our society we're trying to serve. So appreciate the opportunity indeed.
Absolutely. And these are more and more the conversation I want to have. And like I mentioned, you actually wrote a book as well, which is called Bridging Worlds, and is a journey of technology, leadership, and public service. So it really, put into a nice frame what I try to do with this podcast, which is to talk to people like yourself and see maybe what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong as leaders, as educators, as people that do use technology in the business and so on. So we're going to talk about that. But first of all, I would like for you to introduce yourself to our audience with a little bit of your bio. I probably threw a lot of things there, so I want you to package it nicely.
Oh, very much so. And again, thank you. So I'm currently based in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, working on one of the mega projects as part of Vision 2030 as the head of digital and analytics. And before that, I was the former chief technology officer of the city of Toronto. And while I was in Toronto, then I was also the deputy chief information officer of the infrastructure. And through then, I've essentially worked in various industries, mainly in tech, whether it's in the pension and benefit industry, in terms of taking a lot of documentation online, in the industry that's providing private sector and public sector digitization, moving technology in North America, specifically US and Canada, in telecom. So I like to think I've walked up and down the technology stack from the applications layer all to the physical telecommunications layer. But what's also really interesting is that I was also interested in studying business. So I have a business, I have an executive MBA, Master of Management, to understand how finance works, how the movement of creating value. And it became a passion for me being in the public service and understanding how technology can really make society change. Because when you're in the private sector, of course, it's profit and loss. You are making a difference, but it's very focused on a revenue and profitability model. But when you start working for government, your stakeholders, your customers, the business case, there's a whole series of governance and society aspects that has to come into your decision-making as a leader. So that's been my journey. The reason I wrote that book, Bridging Worlds, is we'll talk more, but after living in 5 countries, I do see technology and data as the neutral force that should bridge our society together, because it has no basis from a diversity, equity, and inclusion. Everybody should be included. Diverse people are using technology and it should be equitable in terms of how we are bringing social, economic, and environmental positivity to this world, which also makes it a challenge in bringing everybody in a common vision and a common goal. So that's a little bit about my bio profile, but also a lot of my passion, which is about the community, the society as well.
Yeah. No, definitely. As you're telling these things, and I happen to spoke with in the past with other leaders, servant of government. I think we have some few friends in common when I was checking on LinkedIn that do run other cities. And if there is one thing I've learned is exactly what you said, that the difference between doing something for your customers when you are a leader in a government of a city is the citizen, all of that, right? It's about how you serve them and how you do not create inequality when you do that, and when you're working with a company and the goal, unfortunately, it becomes how much more money are we making, and sometimes we could consider how ethical it is that way or not, but we're not going to go there. I want to stay into the investment and the way that you think when you run a technology program in a city, and how do you actually measure results, because the result is not the economic growth in the quarter, but is probably in the longer term. So I would love for you to tell me about how do you plan and how you show success when you do something.
Yeah. And I'll give some specific examples of use cases. One of the aspects that was really interesting when I was in Toronto was how we bridged the digital divide. So a city like Toronto, 2.9 million people at the time, one of the most diverse cities in North America, being Canada, US, and Mexico. But there was still an equitable issue in the fact that the cost of high-speed internet was very high in the G7 nations in Canada. And also, there's a difference between accessibility and availability. So the technology may be available, but it is accessible at the right cost to ensure that if you're in a low income, and in that case, people were on benefits, if you're having benefits from the government and 60% of your income is going to high-speed internet, is that really an equitable lens? So the measurement of that was that we looked to form something called the municipal broadband network, which was taking government that had fiber. Fiber optics is the basic of telecommunications that gets you high-speed internet, allows you to connect Wi-Fi, leads to the connectivity of driving cellular towers. And how do you make that? So the measurement of success is that we created a private-public partnership between the telecommunications company, a hardware product technology private sector to provide the hardware, then the government to facilitate from a policy, governance, and started to install for 12 months in free public Wi-Fi to high-rise buildings that could cover a geography. That was a measurement of success. And that happened over the pandemic. Because now we were all at home and it became very necessary. So in the Western world, it is very hard to qualify in government how you have those key performance indicator in the measurement. It's very qualitative. It's very soft. In some other parts of the world, whether it's in the Middle East or I'm sure in the East and etc., it's driven within the strategic documentation of not only what your North Star, but how do you measure those benefits as assets. So in my experience, it's really then saying that if we've connected in this use case so much high-speed internet, how many of that community of X could not have accessibility to that available technology, and how did it improve their lives? So for example, were so many children at home at that stage able to do homeschool because you need high-speed internet? Were people now able to do banking? So the measurement becomes, are you creating social impact? And the social impact is, are you creating people who don't feel that they're being left behind as the digital? Are you bridging the digital gap? Are you creating an environment where people can do home businesses at home? Because if you're going to do a home business at home, you need good internet connectivity. So the measurements now can come from, where did you start off through surveys? What investments did you put into that use case? And what was the return on that investment? And then measure that in whatever way you need to measure it in your city. It could be through surveys. It could be what is the, return on the investment as I start. So to me, that is the measurement. And to do that, we built a policy called the Digital Infrastructure Strategic Framework, which had a set of guidelines that technology we were bringing into Toronto had to measure certain key criteria. It had to have social economic benefits. We had to measure that. It had to have equity and inclusion. It needed to have diverse and hitting that population. It needed to ensure it was measuring in participation through democracy and transparency. It needed to measure that the intellectual property we created for that was coming back into the public service so there are ways to do it in terms of that measurement, but it has to be very thoughtful by the leadership in terms of what is the benefit of the taxpayer dollars and the private sector investment to get in that key performance indicators across the line.
Right. Yeah, I love that because it definitely needs to put together a very well thought plan, right? Because politics, as you mentioned, you have to have different players, different pressure from different part of your constituents. And I love how you highlighted the quality, because it's not just about let's give internet to everyone. Well, somebody has a high speed and somebody can barely download a document that they may need, right? So I think it's not just about having it, it's having it in the same measure. I think that's very important.
Right.
So when you do this planning, I mean, one of the things about the book and about the mission that you have in general as a consultant is to bring this, bring together things that work for everyone in technology. But I also said at the beginning, which is the joke that I always say about the blinking lights and the funny noises, which translate into let's just do things because we can, right? Oh, there is this technology for this. Let's do it. We'll find some customer for that. That's how some company can make a decision. But when you're talking about public service planning is really, really important. And also, it's not something that you can do in one day. I mean, often if you invest in a city, in a smart city, sometimes people are, well, I don't even understand what smart city means because I can't see it. It's almost like you go to Disneyland and everything is maybe perfect. You don't know all the stuff that is in the back stage that make it work. So this orchestration and proving to your constituent that you've done something right, I find it very complicated to sit down at a table and make everybody agree. How do you approach that as a leader?
Well, one of the things is that you approach it with first is knowing your customer. And it's, in the private sector, they call it the KYC, know your customer. And once you understand your constituents in terms of the people you're serving, it's then creating a forum, whether it's a town hall, a forum where you can hear their voices. So set a meeting first and say, what are the things that are important to you as a community? And make sure that is a diverse group. And then you go around the city. And we did that. We went to different locations. And then in the pandemic, we had to take it virtually in there. So they gave us feedback in helping developing certain principles and guidelines. So the community first feels that it's not being done to them, it's being done with them. Right? So now it's like, we heard you, we heard safety was important, we heard transportation was important, we heard homelessness was important, we heard some of these key challenges the city is facing, affordability in terms of economic inequality. And we we categorize that and then thought about how do we solve this and who are the right partners to bring to the table from academia, private sector, and the ecosystem. So as the government leader, your job is creating that round table, square table, whatever you want to call it, so the voices are heard. And it isn't necessarily on just agreement by everybody, because you're not going to get everybody to agree on everything. But it's about sharing the fact that you've been heard, and let's now see if we can prioritize, even though it's difficult because everybody wants everything, based on the budget is in these. And let's also link things like if we support and help, if technology helps economic ability, if we can make you create new economies, you're going to contribute taxes, which is going to help drive improvements in social services. So it becomes a round sort of approach whereby there is dependencies, but what do you start off what to build on that? And in linking is that one of the things we found was the word smart city was a technical phrase that came from many, many years ago in the 90s, but we changed the name to connected community.
Mm-hmm.
In Toronto, we changed the name. It wasn't called Smart City. We changed it to Connected Community. And the reason is that we wanted to feel you were connected.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't them versus us. It wasn't private sector versus public sector. It was all of us, including all the stakeholders that were connected to make the community better, even though we may have different interests or different approaches how we see solutions being solved. So you as the government official becomes in the middle to always keep reminding people on that principles. The principles I mentioned in the principles of so remember, we're doing this because of social, economic, environmental. Good point you make, but how does this fit in this category? Remember, we're doing this because we want diversity. So you're constantly reiterating your principles and values as a public servant. And then the outcome will mean we'll get you faster internet, but we have to ensure that it's a partnership with the private sector. And private sector, you can certainly make your revenues, but the areas you may be targeting, which is the areas that have economic, more disposable income, is not really the areas that will be valuable from a overall citizenship and residence, which also ensures that we can improve health and safety in an area. So it's connecting the dots and then bringing everybody together in a thoughtful. You have to be patient. You have to be calm. You have to be mindful. You have to be resilient because it's going to take, but your leadership, strength and presence and empathy is what will differentiate you when people feel saying back to, you heard me. And then it's represented going through when you go to council. So I used to appear on a regular basis on council, which is the elected official. I had to answer questions from the politicians. So the job as the leader, as the CTO, became very much what I call it, the PEST, P-E-S-T, to do all of that. I had to understand politics, both politics there were 44 divisions. I had to understand finance and accounting, economics. I had to be socially astute in terms of diverse in interests, both from, racial backgrounds to economic backgrounds that were diverse and different. And then I had to understand the technology, not necessarily being so technical, which I am, but as a technologist of the power. So that is all. And you had to use all those skills. And sometimes some of that pest would be a lot stronger in some meetings than other meetings. If I'm in front of the politicians or I'm in front of my other 44 leaders, I have to know how to navigate. If I'm speaking finance, I've got to know in terms of what is the capital expenditure. If I'm speaking to the private sector, I've got to know that they're about making money. So how do I give them the incentives to want to still participate? And if I'm on tech, I need to recognize the conversation doesn't really start on tech. That's why the technology is at the end. The conversation starts with the human, which is linked to the politics of the dynamics of how we all react if sometimes we feel we're not getting what we want. So it's being in the public service. I was in the private sector for many years. It's a very complicated role. And if you achieve one or two KPIs of success, by the time you've navigated all this, it's like you've put all the ingredients in and you have a nice meal. then you go away, you say, not bad. And let me see how I can add a bit more salt or a bit more other ingredients to make it better, because there's always continuous improvement and you do it all
Well,
free.
I love that. I love the idea of changing the name, and I have a personal, feeling about sometimes in technology we choose the wrong name. Artificial intelligence is one of those to me. It's kind of like I'm expecting a little bit too much from whatever this artificial intelligence is. Uh, Smart city, I agree with you. You just expect the city to be smart and it's going to make great things for the citizen on their own. Well, what you're explaining is it's about building something together. So connecting the community, listening, also explaining what to expect, right? I think it's not just the internet itself. It's such a big word again. What do you do with that? What do you do with the data? Why is it affecting your citizen in a way that could reflect into a better health system or a better access to jobs opportunity, to a better transportation, as you say. And it's not just sometimes politicians, they like to throw words out there and people are like, but what does it convert into when it comes to me? And I think explaining to them what to expect and making part of the community is very important. So with all your experience and now you mentioned at the beginning, being part of a project that is building something from scratch, sort of. So I'm in Italy right now. I'm in Florence. Very hard to change things here when you have streets where they were made for horses and carriages and buildings in a certain way. So you kind of have to adapt. And you have this experience now that you work on that, but you also, I'm understanding that you had the opportunity to apply what you know to something that could be already at a different level because it wasn't there before. So is it too much to have so much freedom? How do you handle that?
Well, you break it down. So first you break it down on the digital strategy, which is what we've done. And within that strategy, it's almost like if you're building a house, you have a plot of land, and sometimes you're coming greenfield where there's nothing there. Sometimes you're coming where there is some assets there. So it's brownfield. And greenfield and brownfield becomes blurfield. So the experience that I've seen is try to build that. So what you do is that you don't so much look at the size, because that can be overwhelming. Oh, I've got to start. You start, what is the foundation? And you build, it's sort of a house. You say, first, I've got to ensure that the regulations or the policies are being built. And some of this is not a sequential build. It could be all have to. But first, you have to lay that plan. We've got to get the policies, the internal policies, the external policies, the regulations in place as we're building of what a city for the future or a city now to serve. And then it starts from that with the personas. So your visitors, your residents, your investors. So you go personas, you go policy regulation. Then you start saying, okay, what does it start? It starts with telecommunications. ICT is the interconnection. Without fiber, without cellular services, you're not going to have people connect. Then you move over to the applications and say, what are the right applications? Is it a ability to have transportation service, the ability for, security? And then you then state, well, data is the most secret, important, accessible. I guess what I meant is secret source. The data is very important. It's the secret piece that comes into there. So I've got to integrate the data. Then you have to ensure that the data is, accessible. And I use the way that, in Toronto, I define something called the 5S principles. What you're building has to have stability for the first S. What you're building then has to be able to scale as your residents and your community get bigger and bigger, and businesses. What you're building has to have a solution that's integrated. You don't want to build silos, or the data you can't have a command center that can say, how do we respond to incidents? And then what you have to ensure that it's secure, because cybersecurity, operational technology, information technology, technology as a whole, and then you have to be sustainable. You're building it on the cloud, you're building it maybe partly in data centers. So you build that sort of roadmap architecture, and you build it's you have to have a very strong architectural mind in digitizing a city. And once you do that with policy and regulation, and you build the leadership, you build the right structure, then you sort of go phase by phase, and you develop. Obviously, the bigger the project, the bigger the city, the bigger the aspirations, the more complex. But the most important thing that surrounds it is the governance. You've got to govern it, because if you don't start off on governance early, what is the governance? Then you're going to have maybe lots of discussions, but with no tangible management to get you into action. So that's sort of the approach that, in my experience, you approach it. And then within a few years, you've created a model, you've created a strategy, you've created a roadmap. And then each year you go initiative by initiative, and then you measure remembering what your North Star, which is your vision and mission, to what you're trying to achieve.
I like the 5S quite a bit, because it makes something complex, and it is complex, but make it more concrete. And
Correct.
It doesn't matter how the technology will change, and it will change, because that's where I want to go with you next, is how do you kind of foresee when you do something big that takes time? What is it going to tell you that tomorrow a new piece of technology comes in and you're like, damn it, now I have to choose, I have to change things around? But I want to keep that as a question, but the observation to make it organic, I like that. You use with what you got, and you make it sustainable. And of course, for me, smart city or interconnected community also is a synonymous of environmental choices.
Correct.
Nowadays, right? So that's important. So as a leader, you and many other leaders that sits down together, you have the people that you report, the people that you have to answer, you have the technologists, the politicians. And so how do you put your futuristic thinker hat? I don't know, you cross your finger and say, well, I hope this is the right choice. The technology, the 5Gs, it's not the 7Gs or whatever that is.
Right.
It sounds like a big challenge to me nowadays, especially with technology to change so much faster than what it used to be 200-300 years ago, for sure.
Yes. And one of the areas you can do is create two things: incubation zones. So you can create a zone that says special zoning. You see that in some of the new cities where they're saying we're going to give special zoning. So the laws of the regulations that would traditionally apply in a brownfield city, one that's already been developed, if we're building a city for sale, we'll say this zone is a special area for experimentation. So it will have things that are much more futuristic or thinking. So it's a playground that you can do R&D experiments. You fail, and then, but if coming out of there, and they're called digital factories, they're different names: incubation, different factories, special zones. What you then develop, you take there, and if you take, say, 10, 11, a certain use case, all you want is one that can now scale into the second S. So it doesn't stop the experimentation, but what do you need? You need telecommunications, you need data, you need some foundational pieces that is there for the experiments to happen, right? So you then say that is using a technical career. You create a DMZ, demarcation area that sort of moves it off from the traditional day-to-day. You then bring in, scientists, innovators, academias, experts to say, look at things that are maybe not coming through. And that's a great one for an example of a tech of quantum computing, which I actually think is the biggest next futuristic tech that is coming out once it's more commercialized at a price point, because that will take AI on a whole different level because of the speed of the rapid response. So you can try cases there in solving. But what's important with that digital factory, it's not just tech people. You bring in business people. You bring in the community and say, if you could look at the city from 5 years, what is the most immediate thing? You bring PhD people, researchers, right? People who are doing things that people cannot even imagine. And then, but you create the environment to explore, and there is methodologies to do that. And some of the private sector has these incubation areas in Europe, in North America, where leaders go to think differently, to be innovative. And then you bring that and you create that sort of academy in your city as while you're developing. And once an idea comes up that is at a level, even if it's an MVP, minimal viable product, we changed a word in the city that I'm currently working to called IOC. Is it ready at the integrated operational capability? So is it can it integrate right now, or is it initial operating capability? See, the word's simple. Is it now at the early stage that we can integrate it into a more traditional mature technology or a mature society? Or is this an FOC? Is it a future operating capability where we need more refinement, we need more time? And so that is the way, and it's a digital factory. It's incubation, whatever word works for you, but it's a factory that brings private, public sector, and academia. The universities are very important. And together with the community, you are now thinking, and that's the way that you still keep the future alive. And you just need one or two ideas, but you've got to experiment a lot on it.
Right. I love that. I want to end this. Well, first of all, I could talk forever about this because when we start talking philosophical as well, I just start thinking, that the utopia, the dystopia scenario, and how we tend to avoid that, which kind of connected with where I want to go as the last question, which is reconnecting with the book, which is based on your experience, the multicultural experience that you had from growing up in Nigeria and then working all over the world. And also the idea of bridging the world and using technology for good, right? Where do you think we're standing right now with really using the potential of technology for good? And I'm asking you this because a lot of people when they think technology, they get scared. They think AI taking their job, generative AI stealing copyrights and industries that again, maybe robotics, they have this and that. I'm not on that side, right? But I think that we need to remind people that technology can be a very, very strong force for good. And I would love for you to share what is your vision for actually and where we're standing in using technology for humanity.
Yeah, and technology is the greatest equalizer, and it can be used for both good and bad if it's not thoughtful based on your value system. So at the end of the day, in the 5 countries I've lived in, and the reason the word bridging worlds is that there's one thing unique. We are humans, and humans will still be around, even though, we are still a human society. And we have very similar, even though sometimes it can seem we're different. We want economic prosperity for our families. We want safety. We want security. So the common denominator, that's where the conversation should start. Let's find things in common, whether we speak different languages, we have different backgrounds, we're in gender, different color. We start on the basis of some unique aspects that connect us. Then we state that in every different part of the world, there are different challenges. In some areas, there is a need to use technology to bring new economies, to create new jobs that just don't exist, to transition from, if you're a fossil fuel country, to something that's more environmentally friendly. It's technology that's going to do that. And it's the people that are going to get together. Or if you're trying to do a lot of fintech, financial tech, if you look at in the continent of Africa, for example, fintech is huge because there is a group of people around the world there and in various parts of the world and in South America who don't have accessibility to traditional banking, right? They're not traditional banking, or they don't have trust in the banking system in terms of protecting them, especially based on movement. So technology now can be the equalizer to say that let's have financial movement. And I'm not talking on crypto, I'm talking on the movement of money that is using an electronic format in how you create people in remote areas, as long as they have access to the internet, or build businesses. So for me, I'm hopeful that if leaders start talking from the people angle and talking about what unites us first, as opposed to what separates us, what doesn't make us, let's start with, we all want to, as I said, provide prosperity for our family. Who in the world would say I don't? We all want safety. And often the conversation starts, if it's divisive, if it starts with them and us, if it starts with, we have this, we compete against you. And the reason why I wrote the book, Bridging World, and I like that, is that having lived in so many places, and even not speaking, I'm in a country where it's not my first language, is in Arabic, the people I'm working with, we all have similarities. How we do it could be different. How we approach it, how we finance it, what our culture is different. But let's be very honest. We all want the same thing. So if you can bridge those worlds and say, stop, we have commonality, then you have then technology can be the bridge that says, if we give you high-speed internet and we modernize the society and we bring tourism, we bring prosperity, maybe we can then focus our effort on everybody is feeling that they're taken. It's when there is a have and have not, that's when people start to feel lost and feel that technology is for certain groups and technology will be left behind. And that is, in coming back, bridging that digital divide and that technology divide.
I love it. Couldn't say that better myself, Lawrence. That was amazing. See, no, I can see it. That being a neutral language that could connect. It's almost like when you think about mathematics, when you watch a movie about how we're going to talk to the aliens, like Contact, back in the days. Well, mathematics is the neutral language. The assumption in that movie was that when you were explaining about technology being that common base, but it depends how you use it, that kind of gave me that. And again, it's not good, it's not bad. Also, it is good if we use it good. So, Lawrence, fascinating conversation. I hope the audience enjoyed it and could go in a lot of different places. I would love to have you back sometimes to even learn more about what you're doing now there in Riyadh and in that part of the world. But I really hope people will get away with this with a lot of questions, do the research, and I love the idea of connecting community. I think that's a big key for me, that I'm gonna big takeaway from this conversation for me. I'll use it again if you allow me.
Indeed, please. And if people want to follow me, I do a newsletter every 2 weeks called The Digital Bridge on LinkedIn, my first name, last name, as well as Instagram, the.Lawrence. So I'm quite active in terms of publishing my thoughts and through my book, Amazon.com. And let's keep the conversation, because we all need input into this as one overall society. So thank you very much, Rico.
I want to thank you again. And all you said, I will write it down in the notes. So if people want to get in touch with you on LinkedIn and on your website, they will be able to click on the link and do that. And everybody else, stay tuned for more conversation as we try to make technology a little bit more human and serve our purpose. And I agree with you. It's all the same, which sometimes just use different words for it, but I think we all have the same goal as a human. So thank you again, Lawrence. Thank everybody for listening, and stay tuned for more Redefining Society and Technology podcast episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Moko. Thank you.
BlackCloak provides concierge cybersecurity protection to corporate executives and high net worth individuals to protect against hacking, reputational loss, financial loss, and the impacts of a corporate data breach. Learn more at blackcloak.io.